Picture two Glasgow giants locked in a century-long war where every tackle feels like settling an ancient score, where fans wave flags that scream identity louder than any chant, and where the beautiful game has been hijacked by ghosts of famine, faith, and fury that refuse to die. What if the hatred on the pitch isn't really about who scores more goals, but about who you are, where you came from, and what you refuse to forget? This isn't just football. This is the old firm, Celtic versus Rangers, and the real reason it burns hotter than almost any derby on earth might shock you. Hey, Sports Radar family, welcome to the third chapter of our brand new series, Derby Stories, the untold wars behind the beautiful game. We kick things off with the political firestorm of El Clásico, Barcelona against Real Madrid, then dove headfirst into the money and power clash of the Milan Derby between AC Milan and Inter. Now we're crossing the Irish Sea and landing in Scotland for what many call the most dangerous, most passionate, and most divided rivalry in world football. And trust me, this series is just warming up. More explosive derbies are coming your way soon, so buckle up and stay locked in.
Alright, let's talk about one of the most intense, most ferocious rivalries in all of world football, Celtic versus Rangers. This is a story where the real battle lines were drawn way before a ball was ever kicked. We're talking about a conflict rooted in faith, famine, and the very soul of a city. So, the Old Firm Derby makes you ask a really big question. What if all that raw hatred you see on the pitch, in the stands, what if it's not actually about goals and trophies? What if it's about history, about identity, and about these centuries-old wounds that just won't heal? This isn't just a game. For so many in Glasgow, it's everything.
To understand a fire this big, you have to go back to the very first spark. And believe it or not, this whole story of pure hatred actually begins with friendship. I know, sounds crazy, but it all started in the smoky industrial heart of 19th century Glasgow.
So, picture this. First, in 1872, you have Rangers, started by a few local Scottish guys in a largely Protestant part of town. Then, 15 years later, a completely different kind of club is born. Glasgow is seeing a massive wave of Irish immigration because of the famine back home, and in 1887, Celtic was founded specifically to help that struggling community. And their first match against each other in 1888, it was called a friendly. No riots, no police, just football. And you can't really get Celtic without understanding its founder, a man named Brother Walfrid. His goal wasn't winning championships. It was much more fundamental. It was about survival. He saw these Irish families in Glasgow's East End, living in poverty, dealing with prejudice. He created Celtic as a fundraising machine for a charity, literally, to put food on the table for starving kids, and to give this community something to be proud of. This is actually where that famous nickname, the Old Firm, comes from. And it's not what you think. It wasn't about bitterness. Early on, a newspaper commented that the two clubs were like old firm friends because they both saw that the rivalry was great for business. They needed each other to make money and grow. It's pretty wild to think about that now, isn't it?
But yeah, that friendship, it didn't last. It just couldn't survive the deep cracks that were already running through Glasgow. These massive fault lines of society, religion, and politics.
And this is the whole thing in a nutshell. The clubs became these giant vessels for identities that were already there. If you were an Irish Catholic immigrant, Celtic was your team. It was your sanctuary, a symbol of your Irish heritage. And if you were a local Scottish Protestant, loyal to Britain, Rangers was your fortress. Your club wasn't just something you cheered for, it was who you were. It was an identity passed down from your grandfather, to your father, to you.
And the symbols tell you everything you need to know. You'd see the Irish tricolour waving at Celtic Park and the Union Jack waving at Ibrox. These weren't just flags, they were powerful statements of allegiance to different countries, different histories. The divide got even deeper with club policy. For decades, Rangers had this unwritten, but very real, rule. They would not sign Catholic players. Celtic, meanwhile, stayed true to its founding ideals and hired players from any background.
So you've got all this tension just simmering, right? What was about to boil over and explode. The rivalry was about to transform from a local grudge match into a full-blown proxy war for a real, bloody conflict happening just across the Irish Sea.
In the 1970s and 80s, the Troubles in Northern Ireland just poured gasoline on this fire. The football stadiums in Glasgow basically became an echo chamber for that conflict. Celtic fans would sing Irish rebel songs, some even showing support for the IRA. Rangers fans would fire back with loyalist anthems. The game itself almost became secondary to this political warfare happening in the stands. And let's be clear, this was way more than just chants and songs. The hatred had awful, real-world consequences. If you look at police reports from that time, you see these huge spikes in assaults and riots on Old Firm Derby days. It tore families apart, it destroyed friendships, an entire city would just hold its breath for 90 minutes because everyone knew the final whistle could ignite chaos.
But you know, even the thickest, highest walls can eventually start to crack. And in the late 1980s, one man made a decision so unbelievably bold that it challenged decades of bigotry and changed the Old Firm forever.
The year was 1989. This moment sent an absolute shockwave through all of Scottish society. It was one single strategic decision that basically said winning football games was more important than decades of entrenched hate.
Rangers manager Graham Souness did what everyone thought was impossible. He signed a player named Maurice Mo Johnston. Now, Johnston wasn't just Catholic, he was a former Celtic star. The backlash was immediate and intense. You had Rangers fans literally burning their season tickets. But Souness had a vision. He wanted to modernize the club. He wanted a team that could win in Europe, and he didn't care what a player's religion was.
That one transfer, it forced a massive change. Rangers' discriminatory policy was officially over. In the years that followed, both clubs, facing a lot of pressure from society and sponsors, started to take real action. Celtic launched its Boys Against Bigotry campaign. Rangers started its Follow with Pride campaign. They both started working with community programs to try and clean up the toxic side of the rivalry. So where does that all leave us today? Well, the fire of the Old Firm is still burning, for sure. But the fuel that feeds that fire, it's starting to change. For a lot of fans now, especially the younger generations, the whole equation has flipped. Look, the history is always going to be there, you can't erase it. But they'll tell you that today, the rivalry is like 90% about what happens on the pitch, the passion for the game itself, the desperate need to win. That old sectarian poison is still there, lingering in the shadows, but it's not the main event anymore. And this shift is so obvious. In the past, the argument in the pub after a match would be all about your identity, your history. Today, it's much more likely to be about the manager's 4-3-3 formation, a player's transfer fee, or a terrible VAR call. The conversation is slowly, but surely, shifting from theology to tactics.
When you boil it all down, the history shows us that football didn't actually create this divide in Glasgow. It just inherited it. All the complicated stuff, immigration, religion, class, politics, that was already there. Celtic and Rangers just became the most powerful symbols, the perfect outlets for people to show the world who they were and what side they were on.
And so that leaves us with this one final question that just kind of hangs in the air. The story of the Old Firm is so much more than football. It's a mirror that society holds up to itself, and it forces us to ask, can our games ever be truly free from the historical wounds that we all carry? Or are they always destined to be the place where we act out our deepest divisions?
If this story lit a fire in you, if it made you angry, proud, curious, or all three, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment and tell us honestly, what do you think is the true root of the Celtic Rangers rivalry? Is it religion? Politics? History? Or something even more primal? Be respectful, but be real. The Sports Radar community wants to hear every side. And if you're not subscribed yet, fix that immediately. Smash the bell, join the family, and never miss another episode of Derby Stories. Next time we might cross to Merseyside for Liverpool vs Everton, or head to Buenos Aires for Boca vs River. The world of derbies is endless, and we're just getting started. This has been Sports Radar, where we don't just show you the goals, we show you the wars behind them. See you in the next one.